Well, everyone, welcome to Mr. Wynn's Weekly. I am so excited to be back on campus, back on the grind. Got cross-country season full swing, classes full swing. Everything's going. I'm ready to have a win semester. I'm ready to have a win semester. I hope everyone else is, and want to welcome everyone back to campus first couple weeks.
Yes, absolutely. Welcome back, everyone. We know that it's very early into the semester, but we're just as pumped as ever to get back into the groove of things, starting with today's latest episode. So, Jack, why don't you tell us what book you have to talk about today?
So this summer and this semester, I've been reading The 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Now, Robert Greene's one of the best authors out there. He has a lot of books. They're all really good. So if you're looking for reading material, definitely look into him as an author in general. And today, I want to talk about... Now, the book, 33 Strategies of War, is kind of about applying the mind to how warriors and generals succeeded in the toughest battles in history. And so there's a lot of stories in here about generals and even stories about professional athletes and even movie directors and famous authors who had different kinds of battles in life, because not everyone actually goes to war, especially nowadays. There's not world wars going on, but life is a battle. And so reading these strategies, definitely I applied them to school and cross country and even more, like any aspect of life. I found this applicable. Now, my favorite strategy, the one I'm going to talk about today, is called the counterbalance strategy. Now, let me jump right into the reading. So, the counterbalance strategy is described as followed. Amidst the turmoil of events, do not lose your presence of mind. In the heat of battle, the mind tends to lose its balance. Too many things confront you at the same time. Unexpected setbacks, doubts, and criticism from your own allies. And there's a danger of responding emotionally with fear, depression, or frustration. Now, in these moments, it is vital to keep your presence of mind, maintaining your mental powers whatever the circumstances. You must actively resist the emotional pull of the moment, staying decisive, confident, and aggressive no matter what hits you. Make the mind tougher by exposing it to adversity. Learn to detach yourself from the chaos of the battlefield. Let others lose their heads. Your presence of mind will steer you clear of their influence and keep you on course. Now, I love when he talks about the emotional. So a lot of times, you're trying to study for a test, or maybe if you're an athlete, you're trying to get ready for your event or game or whatever. And a lot of times, the biggest thing that happens to a lot of students and athletes is fear, anxiety, or just overall, you kind of shut out from the moment, when even though that's the moment you want to be in full composure so you can either perform your best or do the best on your test or study your best for the tests to come. And so when he talked about fear, he connected it to a story about General George S. Patton. And if you guys don't know who George Patton is, he's a very famous World War II general of America's Third Army. And so I think he became very famous after the Battle of the Bulge, which is when the Germans counterattacked a weak point in the United States Army and they were gaining ground, but then General Patton came from far away and completely fought them off, and it was seen as an impossible deed, but he got it done because he had a very disciplined army and it was a very successful general in World War II. And so he talked about when George S. Patton was from his actions in World War I, which is very interesting. So this is as followed. George S. Patton came from one of America's most distinguished military families. His ancestors include generals and colonels who had fought and died in the American Revolutionary and Civil War. Raised on stories of their heroism, he followed in their footsteps and chose a career in the military. But Patton was also a sensitive young man, and he had one deep fear: that in battle he would turn coward and disgrace his family name. Patton had his first real taste of battle in 1918 at the age of 22, during the Allied offensive on the Argonne during World War I. He commanded a tank division. At one point during the battle, Patton managed to lead some American infantrymen to a position on a hilltop overlooking a key strategic town, but German fire forced them to take cover. Soon it became clear they were trapped. If they retreated, they would come under fire from positions on the sides of the hill. If they advanced, they would run right into a battery of German machine guns. If they were all to die, as it seemed to Patton, better to die advancing. At the moment, he was to lead his troops in the charge. However, Patton was stricken by tense fear. His body trembled, his legs turned to jelly. In a confirmation of his deepest fears, he has completely lost his nerve. At that instant, looking to the clouds beyond the German battery, Patton had a vision. He saw his illustrious military ancestors, all in their uniforms, staring sternly down at him. They seemed to be inviting him to join their company, the company of dead war heroes. Paradoxically, the sight of these men had a calming effect on young Patton. Calling for volunteers to follow him, he yelled, "It's time for another Patton to die." The strength had returned to his legs. He stood up and charged toward the German guns. Seconds later, he fell, hit in the thigh, but he survived the battle. From that moment on, even after he became a general, Patton made a point of visiting the front lines, exposing himself needlessly to danger. He tested himself again and again. His vision of his ancestors remained a constant stimulus, a challenge to his honor. Each time it became easier to face down his fears. It seemed to his fellow generals and to his own men that no one had more presence of mind than Patton. They did not know how much of his strength was an effort of will. The story of Patton teaches us two things. First, it is better to confront your fears, let them come to the surface, than to ignore them or tamp them down. Fear is the most destructive emotion for presence of mind, but it thrives on the unknown, which lets our imaginations run wild. By deliberately putting yourself in situations where you have to face fear, you familiarize yourself with it and your anxiety grows less acute. The sensation of overcoming a deep-rooted fear in turn gives you confidence and presence of mind. The more conflicts and difficult situations you put yourself through, the more battle-tested your mind will be. Second, Patton's experience demonstrates the motivating power of a sense of honor and dignity. In giving in to fear and losing presence of mind, you disgrace not only yourself, your self-image, and your reputation, but your company, your family, your group. You break down the communal spirit. Being a leader of even the smallest group gives you something to live up to. People are watching you, judging you, depending on you. To lose your composure would make it hard for you to live with yourself. So wow, yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, that's a lot of psychologically deep stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I guess one question I had is that you talked about General Patton inserting himself on the front lines, potentially on the face of death, due to this psychological revelation that he had in the moment. But for most of us, we're not at war. We're not in any dangerous situations. We're not living in caveman times where we have to depend on, it's like sort of depending on people to accept us, and that's where the fear aspect comes in.
Yeah.
So how can you apply what General Patton experienced in the moment on a much smaller scale so that it's more relatable and more sufficeable for the average person?
So I think a lot of times, for me, what I think of is finals week. Finals week, I have all these finals, I have all these projects. You're not literally facing death, but it kind of feels like it. Kind of like if you fail, if I fail this, I'm done. My parents will be mad, or I might, be kicked out of college even, or, have hard time finding a job if I have a bad grade. Your mind spins, and so you get all these doubts and fears and all this stuff. But what this story kind of says, it's like, well, if you feel that moment and you're like, well, I'm not dropping out of college. I'm going to get through finals week anyway. So I have to do this, and there's no backing out. And so I like what he says, better to die charging. And so that's kind of how I think of it. It's like, instead of just, being doubts, criticisms, oh, I'm scared, I don't know if I can pass. And it's this counterbalance strategy is you have to go the opposite way of, okay, this is going to be a really hard time for me. I know I'm going to have to study a lot. I know this is going to be challenging. I know this is going to take everything out of me. But one, I can do it. And two, the best way is going to end up if I just charge right in. And so the more you do that, and so we have this whole semester to prepare. So you have every test, every assignment. So the more you just charge right in and oh, I don't feel like doing this, or oh, I'm afraid of doing bad on this test, or I'm afraid of my parents finding out a bad grade, or even just failing the semester and stuff like that. The best way to do it is just charge right in, and to not be afraid and realize that there's so many people who go through college every year. Everyone feels fear. Everyone goes through the same thing, and knowing that it's oh, I can get through this too. And so realizing that a lot of people, even their parents and grandparents, go through college too. It's like, oh, they went through this, now it's my turn to go through this. And so now it's my turn to face finals week. And so knowing the best ways to charge through, knowing the best ways that everyone else has been through this and that you can too, it brings you a sense of confidence. And then once you start getting it through, you start doing the study and you start taking these tests after tests after tests, and you really get through that, then you really find strength, and you have this powerful sensation of overcoming this fear of the test, or fear of failing and stuff like that. And so the overcoming of that is like the strongest you'll ever feel in your life. And then after college, you're like, oh, I already been through college, I can get through job interview, I can get through having kids, or whatever challenges further adult life brings.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I feel like, it's not just with the studying aspect, it's with basically everything that's going to go through, such as relationships or finances, for example.
Yeah.
So you say that it's best to charge through instead of just lay back in a corner in fear. But what would you say to someone who may be having sort of second thoughts or just unnerving anxiety, or how would you sort of remind them about the long-term implications that something might have if you do it as opposed to not doing it?
First, to talk about like having second thoughts or kind of being indecisive, it's like, well, if you live your whole life indecisive, like you'll literally never do anything. And so it's like, even though you're indecisive, like just try one thing. And once you try that one thing, and like especially if it's something tough and you get through that and you realize like, and even if that's not what you want to do, like say for the rest of your life, if it's a job you're trying to get, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this job for the rest of my life, or it's a certain class or degree that you have to get through, like, oh, I might not want to do it. But if you're able to get through a hard class, hard degree, or if you do get successfully pass an interview, get a job that you don't like, it's like you already know what that's like, and you know how to get through that, and now you know better where you want to go, so then you can turn to something else that you really want to do, and then you'll be twice as motivated, plus you have the confidence that you've gotten through it. Now for someone that has, like you said, like really strong anxiety, like obviously therapy might help you if it's that serious of a disorder. But for someone who just like in this moment, Patton was like so full of fear he couldn't move, and he was like completely tense, and his worst fears came true. Like let's say you get that F on a test that you didn't want, and you might think, oh, this is over, or like, oh, I got that F, like, oh, I don't know how I'll come back from this, oh, what am I gonna do? It's like, it's kind of same thing. It's to balance out that mind of say it's spinning and spinning and spinning, oh, what do I do? Well, I failed, stuff like that. Kind of go back to the, okay, like I didn't pass this test, or I'm really afraid of it's going to be really hard. It's like, if you didn't study the right way and you didn't study enough, now you know for next time. So now you know either study more or figure out a better way of studying, and you can, as you go through these challenges and as you take them head on, and maybe you don't succeed every time, but the next time you'll have much better chance of succeeding because you know it doesn't work. And so you go here, you try it, okay, it doesn't work out the best, but at least I tried my best. I charged through, I did all I could. Now let me tweak my strategy a little bit and then try it again. And so instead of spinning on the, oh, I'm a failure, I don't know what's going to happen, like stuff like that, you kind of change your strategy and then charge again, and keep doing that until you will succeed, and you will eventually succeed. A much greater chance than if you're just indecisive, if you don't do anything. It's like if you actually do something, then you can learn from it.
Yeah, and I definitely understand the feeling of that. Like, I certainly benefited from this advice very much, learning it today, and I'm pretty sure everyone else watching can as well.
Yeah, I definitely benefited a lot from reading this book. I'm a runner, and so I always think when I'm running, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a lot of pain right now. I'm like, well, I have to finish the run anyway, so I might as well finish as strong as I possibly can, even though I'm hurting right now. It may not go the way I want it to go, but I just got to keep finishing strong.
Yeah, Wayne State's got to get on top of the cross-country charts.
Yes, sir.
Got to beat Grand Valley at it.
We're doing that this year.
We've been up top for too long, man.
That's facts. No, we're doing that this year. So.
Yeah, but other than that, I really think that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving us that advice, Jack. What plans do you have for the next episode?
I'm reading a lot now, and so I actually am not sure yet. I have a lot out there, so we'll see. So it'll be something real special.
For real. And when we get to that point, I'm sure it's going to be another great book for our viewers to read.
Absolutely. Stay winning. You guys got this.
Yes. Thank you so much for watching today, and we will see you next time on Mr. Wins Weekly.